Well, I think we can start.
Yeah, let's get started.
So I don't know whom it is safe to call on to ask us to open in prayer. So I guess I will do it. John, I'm going to talk for 2 hours. So
In Chinese.
maybe.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this wonderful day. We thank you for bringing him to us and share all this workshop with us. Please bless our time and bless Kenny. So may his sharing and the message is really from you and have a very effective impact on each one of us. And please bless this time and make us get a good use of the time. In this moment, may we pray.
Amen.
So we're talking about managing anger today, so I'm going to help you all, maximize anger. There's a little personal background. Helen has been after me to do something like this and to write it down for a long time because I actually have a terrible temper. I come from a family with lots of major anger issues. So insofar as there's a genetic component, I have it. My great-grandfather used to beat his children with barbed wire. The biggest concern that my grandmother's family had when she decided to marry my grandfather was that they did not want her marrying into a family where the men beat the women. And that was one of the things that they had to work out very, very early. So my parents had to invest a huge amount of time in getting me to control my anger. Helen has trouble believing this because she says she never sees me get angry once every year or so. But that's because I had to spend so much time learning to control it. My father, for over a year, my father forbade me to play volleyball with the other kids at church when we were playing volleyball as a youth group because I would get too angry with the other players for playing badly and for not taking the game seriously enough. So I want to make something clear. I am not a trained therapist or counselor. So I have no qualifications to teach this other than that I have a really bad temper and that I've had to learn to use it. So all I can really tell you is what I have found works for me. So that's what I'll do. I'll tell you what I have found that works for me. And I don't pretend to know how generally applicable it is. But before we start, Abby, I should have had this message up so that I could make sure I didn't quote Abby incorrectly, but Abby borrowed her mother's WeChat over the week to tell me that she had looked at one of my old blog posts that happened to have pictures from when I was first dating Helen. And when I saw his picture in the blog, this was my reaction. Then there's a string of about 7 emoticons, which she then explains as surprised and doubled over laughing. So this is... That's Abby reading my blog post. So I don't know whether this was the picture that she thought was so funny. When I went to China just to get some Starbucks, or maybe this one. That's the park in Shanghai. I thought this was great. This is the park in Shanghai. It's like eHarmony, except that It's paper on a
Ah,
box.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
And it's not the kid, it's not the people who are wanting to get married, it's their parents who are afraid that their kids are never going to get married. And so they're like, the parents are out there trying to arrange marriages. Helen told me, we went by this group of people who were talking to each other, and she said, well, that couple has a son, and that couple has a daughter, and they just said, now don't tell him where you got his number. But, so, is it better from sitting here? Or maybe have a nice background? Or if I look really, really cool, we can try
Yeah,
that.
very different. Cannot recognize you. Cannot recognize you.
Yeah. How many years ago?
This is 8 years ago.
8 years ago.
Yeah. And I do know one thing. We can put Helen in the picture. Anyway, so I gather the thing that struck you most was the hair. When my daughter Mary was 2 years old, I got bored having a beard and I shaved it off, and I had a beard for the 5 years previously, so she had literally never seen me without a beard. And she came into the living room and saw me sitting on the couch, and she sort of froze. And I said, Mary, I said, that's all right, come here, I just shaved my beard off. She came over and she climbed up in my lap and she put her head on my shoulder. She said, Daddy, would you please shave your beard back on? But since she mostly objects to the hair, I figured we'd go back to my very first driver's license when I was 16, and we'll see what you think of this one.
Popcorn stuff.
I was the only white guy on the basketball team, and I wanted to look like everybody else. Here's a picture from before the prom.
Gosh.
The pink cummerbund, I had to match my girlfriend's dress. So anyway, there you go. I thought you'd enjoy that. So, what is anger? We'll try to get serious now. After that.
Try to?
Yeah, after that opening it can be difficult. So what is anger? This is the part where I don't say anything until someone else answers, just so you know.
It's an emotion.
It's an emotion. What else?
Cannot control temper.
Can't control your temper. What else?
Mean face.
A mean face. That is more insightful than you realize, actually. We'll get to that. What else? So we use the word to mean lots of different things.
Tone.
So your tone, your body language, that's how you show it. Most of it comes down to three things. It is a physical state. We talked about this a little bit a couple of weeks ago about how your amygdala kicks in and floods your brain with the adrenaline, the hormone. It's also an emotional state, and it's a sin. Except that it's not that anger is all these three things. Okay? These are three different things. It's that we use the same word for these three different things. So controlling anger, it's not like a set of rules to control anger. You need to be able to deal with the physical state, you need to be able to deal with the emotional state, you need to be able to deal with the sin. Those are different things, and they require different treatment, right? So we'll sort of go through all of them. But basically, it's useful to think of it that because of the physical state is chemistry. This is a brain state, this is what's going on inside your body. The emotional state, it's a matter of stories. Out of the stories you're telling yourself in your head. And when it comes to sin, it's a matter of choices. So, we'll start with the physical state. This slide, if you were here a couple of weeks ago, you'll recognize it. We used this already. This is the amygdala hijacking. So for those of you who weren't here, just very, very quickly, the amygdala is a very primitive part of our brain, very low, just it's right above the brainstem. And when our subconscious thinks that we are being threatened, the amygdala kicks in without asking our permission, and it floods our brain with adrenaline and norepinephrine. This raises our heart rate. It pushes blood to our muscles. It gets us ready to fight or to run away, either one. But among other things, it also floods our prefrontal cortex, which is the part that we think with, and turns it off, so that you literally drop 10 or 15 points of IQ when you're angry, purely as a result of what's physically going on inside your brain. So the first thing that you have to do when you get angry is get yourself physically back to functioning. An angry person is not really functioning at a fully human level. But the part that makes us human and rational has been turned off. So the first step is to try to control that. Just to get yourself physically, to essentially reboot your brain and get yourself back to where you're actually thinking clearly and able to move forward. And the first thing you got to do is realize that you're angry. And my guess is that the women in here the women and girls in here who are not married are like, well, how would you not know you're married? Or how would you not know that you're angry? And the women who are married are like, yeah, my husband gets mad all the time and he's clueless. This is a problem for guys much more than women, because guys tend to be much more not in tune with what's actually going on inside them. So if I were teaching a class for women, we would skip over this in a hurry. But since there are guys here, we'll have to take some time on this one, because guys actually tend to need help. Second thing is, don't do anything, because whatever you're about to do is stupid. And that's a very important thing to understand. Your brain's turned off. Whatever it is that you feel like doing, if you do whatever you feel like doing, you are almost certainly going to regret it because it's stupid. So you have to actively do nothing. Do no harm. That's your sort of first step. It's like the first step for doctors and so forth. Do no harm. And then get yourself physically back to normal. All right? So, anger in this sense is a purely physical state. And so what I think helps a lot of guys, rather than sitting and arguing with yourself whether or not you're really angry, right? When you're angry, now different people have different symptoms, but when you're angry, maybe your fists are clenched. You know, some people can feel their ears get hot. So you have these physical symptoms. Look, if your fists are clenched, then your fists are clenched. So you can skip the part where you argue with yourself about whether you're emotionally angry or not. You're in the physical state of anger, and you need to get the physical state cycle. Right? So the first thing is learn to recognize the physical symptoms. That trembling bottom lip, that's mine. See, different people have different standard reactions. So I can't tell you what the sign of anger is for you. But when my bottom lip starts going like this, my children start hiding. And part of figuring out what the things are is when you know you're angry, look at what's going on inside you. A lot of people feel their stomach tighten up, you know. But there's there's a standard reaction that you have physically when you get angry. And if you don't know what it is, the best way I can think of for you to find out what physical sign says you are angry, your family knows. Okay? That's actually how I found out about the trembling bottom lip. I overheard one of my children telling their friends, I was coming in the room and they didn't know I was there, and I overheard them saying, yeah, when my dad's bottom lip starts trembling, and I was like, really? And the next time I got mad, sure enough, so then I knew. Right? So your family can tell the physical signs that say he's angry or she's angry. So ask them. They can tell you. Okay? And again, if you're a guy, there's probably part of you. So most wives have had this conversation, right? The husband is obviously angry, and they say, "What are you so angry about?" And he says, "I'm not angry. I'm not mad." Well, but, yes, you are mad. No, I'm not mad. But well, I'm mad now because you just made me mad because you kept saying I was mad. Now I'm mad. Lots of wives have had that conversation with their husbands. So, guys, look, don't bother arguing with yourself whether you're angry or not emotionally. Just recognize I am physically in the bad state. So let's get out of the physical state. Okay? Now, there are spiritual disciplines that help you with self-awareness. And there are the physical disciplines that just have to do with awareness, period. So, meditation, or what I would call joyful awareness. I don't know if any of you know Fred Toh, who's a pastor at Houston Chinese Church. He likes to talk about the God Hunt, which is where at the end of every day, you make a list of cool things you saw God do that day. And that you do that as a spiritual discipline to help yourself start paying attention to the cool things God does, and not just take them for granted and let them slide by without being noticed. There's a monk who wrote a classic spiritual book, in the 1700s, I think, Brother Lawrence, called The Practice of the Presence of God, which was cultivating an awareness of God's presence while he was washing dishes or whatever else. It's, again, because this is more of a problem, I think, for guys, I think this has to do with the fact that, number one, guys tend to be much more outwardly focused, but also that we tend to be one track mentally. And so whatever we tend to think about, we tend to get tunnel vision, and then we not stop noticing everything else going around us. And so these disciplines can help you get to where you're actually aware of what's going on outside, which makes it easier to be aware of what's going on inside. Do nothing. This is more difficult than it sounds. Because you have to actively do nothing. And the thing of it is, this is not something you can start doing today. Because what you're having to suppress is your first initial reaction when you get angry. Which means you're having to suppress the thing that you do before you have time to think, including before you have time to think, oh, I'm supposed to do nothing. Right? So, you are not going to be able to, starting now, do nothing when you get angry. What you're having to do is you're having to develop a good habit to replace the natural instinct. Right? So you know how when you have little kids, you have to train them to say thank you, because gratitude does not come naturally. And so every time, when they're 2 or 3 years old, every time anyone does something nice for them, you're saying, and what do we say? And what do we say? And what do we say? Or get them to say please. What's the magic word? What's the magic word? Until they get to where it's automatically. You have to do the same thing here. You have to get to where, when that anger reaction kicks in, that your habit is to do nothing. because by the time you've thought about it, it's too late. This also means that if you are married to someone who's sitting in here now and they have a bad temper, you will have to give them time. Even if they decide they want to do this, you'll have to give them time and to help them with it. American kids of my generation grew up being told, count to 10 before you speak and you get mad. I don't know if there is there something comparable in Chinese. I have the impression that millennials haven't heard this very much. Every American my age has been told, count to 10 before you speak when you're angry. This is just the culture trying to train people not to fire off when they get angry. Counting to 10 is a way of actively doing nothing. So you guys remember what we were talking about with the whole thing with the subconscious, not knowing, not being able to picture, know, right? So saying do nothing isn't helpful, right? Saying count to 10 before you speak, that is something that you do. So for somebody who didn't hear the earlier discussion, so quickly, our subconscious is not logical, it is visual, and the concept of know is a purely logical concept, and our subconscious completely misses it. So if I say, I am not going to fall out of this chair, what you imagine is me falling out of the chair. Right? If I say, for the next 5 seconds, don't think of pink elephants, well then obviously pink elephant is what fills your mind. The way that you don't think about pink elephants is you just pick something else to think about, and you say, well, I'm going to think of an airplane taking off. And then I say go, and you imagine an airplane taking off, and after 5 seconds you haven't thought of pink elephants. So this is the same thing. You want to do nothing, but you can't really tell yourself do nothing, right? So count to 10 is something that you can do instead of whatever you feel like doing. But you have to remember that your body can talk even if your mouth doesn't, right? So just because you don't say anything doesn't mean you're actually not saying anything. The whole deal we were talking about with eye contact and how much we communicate with our eyes. So what I actually do is if I realize that I'm angry, I look down at the floor and put my hands behind my back, as well as not talking. And then I try to get calmed down. So Helen pretty much knows that if she sees me like this, that I'm annoyed, but I am trying to not be a jerk. And so she'll give me time, right? Because if she gives me time, most of the time, I can come back up and we can continue in a reasonable conversation. But if you keep looking at somebody, it's really hard, even if you're not saying anything, it's really hard not to be like, especially Emma, when she said that about the mad face, that's a very actually insightful thing, because most gestures are culturally determined. I used to get so confused when I first started dating Helen, because she kept saying, come here with your mouth, and saying, go away with her hand, right? Because with Americans, you say, come here, go away, right? And the only difference between American go away and Chinese come is whether you think it starts here or here. So Americans, it's come here, go away.
This is only for little kids.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah.
Because she uses it with me all the time.
Obviously, I think in China only it's for little kids.
Oh, she's in trouble. She takes advantage of my ignorance. Do you know that for the first 4 years that we were married, she led me to believe that red envelopes were also for wives?
Where envelope from?
How did you find out?
I think some other Chinese person said, "You give your wife a red envelope?" But the angry face is universal. It's just,
This is why I'm late.
Why not? I said this is why I'm late.
in fact, if you draw a V, out of context, people don't react. But then if you draw another V underneath it, people physically react and tense up. Because as soon as you get both of it, it already looks like an angry face. And babies are programmed to recognize that as anger and as a threat. So
Yeah.
you're actually much more right than you realize. The face gives away, which is why I look down, because I'm not going to be able to hide it, right? And I know perfectly well I'm not going to. Because what's going to happen physically is going to say anger. Right? And then other people will react to it. If you just have to do something, if you just can't calm down, the best thing to do is leave the room. And this is where advice mostly for wives. If your husband, this is something to talk about because you need to know that if your husband leaves, you have to let him go and not chase after him and say, let's get this talked through. That is a very, very bad idea, right? If someone is trying to control their anger, the last thing you need to do is to go interfere with what they're trying to do to control their anger. Now, having said that, if you've got someone in the family who is hugely conflict averse, and if they leave, then when they come back, they'll pretend it never happened and nothing will ever get addressed. That also has to stop. But you can at least wait until you're calm to talk about it. So you gotta give people time to get themselves physically back to where they are sane. Because you don't want to deal with them while they're not. Right? Nothing good is going to come out of that. So, getting your brain physically back to normal, this is actually something that you can do. Because although you cannot consciously control the amygdala, you actually can kick the hypothalamus in, which suppresses adrenaline. And the elite combat units, people like the Navy SEALs, the Rangers, the Special Services, they get specific training on how to rapidly cycle themselves back down, because when you're in a life and death situation, you can't afford to lose 10 to 15 IQ points. Right? So they are trained on the techniques for getting their brain back online before they shoot the wrong person or get shot. Okay? And it is primarily breathing. So Navy SEALs call this 4x4. Different groups have, I'm sure the British call something different. But 4x4 is 4 steps, each of which takes 4 seconds. And it's a straight breathing exercise. One of the things that happens with adrenaline is your breathing speeds up, your heart rate speeds up. If you consciously slow your breathing down, your hypothalamus says, threat must be gone, and it reverses the brain chemistry. So I'm going to teach you how to do it, and we're all actually going to practice. If you do this for a minute, most people, most of the time, will be recycled back into, they'll be rebooted. So you could almost call it 4x4x4, right? Because 4 times 16 seconds is about a minute. If you do this whole cycle 4 times, most people are calmed down. So it looks like this. You're going to breathe in for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds. When you breathe in through your nose, and you breathe with the lower part of your diaphragm. So how many people have been in band and had to play a wind instrument? See, it's a room full of Asians. It's piano and cello. Nobody plays the trumpet. Then they know, I'm sure, how to breathe. So, when you say take a deep breath, most people, when they try to take a deep breath, it looks like this. Right? The shoulders come up. Okay? That is not actually a deep breath. That's a breath that feels deep but is actually shallow. A deep breath happens here. You expand your stomach. Basically, you try to look as pregnant as you can.
That's the yoga breathing.
Is that yoga? I haven't taken yoga, but I played the phone. So you're going to breathe in for 4 seconds through your nose with your stomach. You just have to practice. Then you're going to hold your breath for 4 seconds and try to hold your breath and to relax while you're doing it. In other words, not hold your breath like this, just hold your breath. Then you breathe out through your mouth for 4 seconds. And then you hold your breath. If you do that 4 times, or if you do that for about a minute, most people will be back to normal. And this is what the special forces in combat are trained to do, to keep themselves functioning at a full intellectual level, even in a high-stress situation. So we're going to practice. Ready? So everybody ready? So in the nose and with your stomach, and then out through your mouth. And we're going to start. We will start on the count of 3. So we should start on the count of 4. We'll start on the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, in. 1, 2, 3. Out. 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 2, 3. One more time. In. Hold it. Out. 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 2, 3, 4.
Now I'm lightheaded.
So, if you have managed to do nothing, if you've done whatever it is to do nothing so that you don't blow up, right? So if it's me and you're here, okay, now you can breathe. And Helen and Sally, I'm sure, will tell you that they have seen me standing here going,
I didn't, did
you
you?
know,
What?
but that's, you're getting yourself calm back down.
One in your voice.
All right. The other thing that I have found useful for myself, the physical opposite of anger. Well, there's 2, so one of them is being asleep. But that's not terribly helpful. The thing that is the most unlike anger, your body tenses up, your head tenses up, your face goes like this, right? Your heart tenses up. The thing that is the physical opposite of anger in practically every respect is laughter. When you laugh, you relax, your face smiles, right? And so now I'm going to try to make you laugh, which is almost impossible when I warn you in advance, sadly. But the way you make people laugh is you take them by surprise. But I'm going to show you something that always makes me laugh. When you're laughing, let yourself laugh, but pay attention to how it feels to laugh, to how relaxed you are and everything else. Okay. This is, I think I've mentioned before, there was a pastor in New Zealand who said that the prayer he used the most was, Lord, please help me see the funny side of this. Which is tied to this. If you can laugh, it is, I'll put it this way, if you breathe the 4x4 for a minute, you'll be calm. If you can manage to see the funny side and laugh, you'll be calm now. It's practically instantaneous. Yes?
But it's like impossible when you are angry and then you make yourself laugh.
Not if you can see the funny side.
Do you have an example?
It's so hard.
So I have to say, I am terribly, terribly absent-minded.
Oh.
This is a true story. I find this incredibly frustrating. It is unbelievably inconvenient. Twice, I have driven to work and gotten to work and opened the trunk and discovered that I had left my laptop at home.
More than twice.
And then I go home, and this usually puts me in a bad mood. So there's been a couple of occasions where I've been trying to look on the bright side, and I thought of a couple of things I also forgot to do at home before I left, and thought, all right, well, I can at least do those, and then there'll be some good out of this. So I go home and take care of it. Drive back to the office, open the trunk, and the computer is still at home. And I've done that twice. And the first time I did it, because I am not perfectly good at controlling my anger, the first time I did it, I was literally in the parking lot going like this. Because it was a 45-minute drive one way. I spent 3 hours commuting to work that day. So, and Helen got a phone call from me. So I get up early in the mornings. I get up at like 5:30, and I've got a bed in the back of my car. Because if I go before the traffic starts, it's 20 minutes to my office, and if I go at 7, it's an hour. So I get up at 5:30, and I go in the office, and I go back to sleep, and then I wake up at like 7:30, and then that way I save time. So Helen got a call about 8 o'clock one morning, and I said, all right, I have to come back home. And she said, why? And I said, well, I was just getting out of the car at work, and I realized I forgot to wear a shirt. And and this tells you how absent-minded I am. Helen wasn't even surprised. She just calmly said, well, don't come all the way home, just go to Walmart and buy another one. Then I got to work, and I'd been there about 20 minutes, and someone said, Kenny, do you realize you still have a tag on this? So then I had to tell them what had happened. And I was like, so if I ever come into the office and there's still a tag on my pants, then you'll know what I forgot that day. So it is absolutely enraging because I've spent my life trying to not be like this, and nothing helps. I can't give you a talk on how I can talk about managing anger, but I cannot give you a talk on how to defeat absent-mindedness because I am a grotesque failure in that respect, and I hate it. So I do my best. When I have realized it, I stop, and I remind myself that when I tell this story to y'all, you will think it's funny. And I try to imagine myself telling the story and thinking this is actually kind of funny, and usually within 30 or 40 seconds, I can laugh about it. And once I've laughed about it, then I'm okay. So that's a real life example, because it drives me insane that I do that. But that doesn't keep me from doing it. So, all right, so you get ready to try to, pay attention to how you're feeling physically, and we'll see if you guys think this is as funny as I do. What did I do, Skip?
What?
Well, it's supposed to play. Well, I had that set to autoplay. Well, this is really annoying because that's not a funny picture, it's only a funny video.
Just exit that and then just go to YouTube and do it again.
Let's try this.
You can act it. You do it.
No, I can't. I don't have the prop, and I'm not.
Oh, there is a
Cannot play media.
play.
Yeah, there's a play button.
The left, on the left. Yeah.
There's a play button.
Right there, wait.
It's saying I can't play it?
This is
All
cannot
right,
Cannot
then
play,
let's
yeah.
do this then.
be.
Because I've got this thing sitting on this laptop, so.
It's a picture.
But you can't see it because it's over here, right?
Yeah.
Ah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Wait, replay it.
So,
Go from the beginning. Go from the beginning.
no, this is fine, all right? So, pay attention to how you feel when you laugh, if you laugh.
That was, wow, that was smooth. That was hilarious.
I didn't see what happened the first time.
That was funny. That. Wait. Oh.
Okay, wait.
Take a picture.
Watch the girl. I guess that
Get her hair all right.
She said, oh. She said, oh, and she said, oh my God.
So, how did that feel?
Cold.
Did you remember
Barely
the,
pull up arms.
right? It's the opposite of tension and stress, right?
That explains why, guys always watching useless videos.
Yeah, funny
when you
ones.
are at
Yeah.
home.
It would de-stressing.
Yeah.
Yes, so if you're a wife, you should not complain about how much time your husband spends
We'll be cycling.
watching, because
Amen.
that's, it's keeping him from beating you.
Class is over. This is over.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mom, for watching
Everything
YouTube
that's
for a
important
reason.
has no.
Remember, write it down, okay?
So when wives are angry, they should go to their husbands and ask for some funny video.
That's husband who cook so that we can watch YouTube.
There's, have you guys ever seen the movie A Walk in the Clouds?
Yes.
Yeah, like Keanu Reeves.
Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
So,
云中漫步.
it's a wonderful movie if you haven't seen it.
中文.
Romantic one.
If you watch it, so Reeves is a very good actor, and actors
基
understand
诺里
body
维
language.
斯.
Yeah.
But if you watch, his character is an extremely honorable, extremely decent guy. And there are at least 3 or 4 places in the movie where Reeves clearly understands this and has made his character be someone that this is the way he deals with it. So if you watch that movie, you'll see there are 3 or 4 places where he's trying to leave and they won't let him leave. And you can see him getting really frustrated. And you can see him tensing up, and he'll freeze and he'll go, and you can see him laugh and turn away, and you can see his whole body relax. And then he goes on with his business, right? So I haven't read this anywhere. This is just something that works for me, that I discovered worked for me. But then when I saw the movie and I saw him doing it, I was like, that's right. That's how that works. So that's anger as a physical state. So now let's talk about anger as an emotional state. Okay, so question for you guys: if I'm walking through a train, and just as I'm about to pass a guy in a seat, he does like this, right in front of me.
Yes.
Do I get angry?
Yes.
Depends what happens after.
Do you
Do you know that whether he did it on accident or on purpose?
Ah, there you go. Look at Elliot.
Wow.
Elliot has just shortened the entire discussion. This is well done, not just because the best I expected anyone to get was, did he do it on purpose? But it is not. That actually has nothing to do with whether I get angry or not, whether or not he did it on purpose. What matters is whether I think he did it on purpose. Okay? If he did it on purpose and I think it's an accident, I don't get mad. If he had no idea that I was there, but I think he did, and even, put it this way, if I actually trip and fall, but I believe he didn't know I was there, I don't get angry. Most people don't get angry. Some people will get angry because they just get angry about anything. But most of us wouldn't get angry. And if he did do it on purpose, that just means he got away with it. On the other hand, if I don't even trip, if I see it in time and stop, but I think he did it on purpose, I will usually get angry. Even if he had no clue I was there. It does not matter what's going on in his head. What matters is what's going on inside mine. Okay? The emotions that we feel, all the emotions that we feel, happiness, sadness, everything else, come from, we don't even realize this, I think most of us, because it's automatic and it's going on all the time. We are constantly telling ourselves stories about what has happened to us and about what's happening to us right now. We are subconsciously sort of narrating the script. And among other things, we are constantly telling ourselves stories about what's going on inside other people's heads. And this is a huge problem because we are really, really bad at it, but we think we're really good at it. Okay? The truth is, the stories that we tell ourselves about why other people are doing things usually don't say anything very, very important about the other person. What they usually say a whole lot about is us. And the reason is that our natural assumption is that other people are like us. And somebody else does something, and what we do, without it, it's purely automatic, is it's as if our subconscious says, now what would I have to be thinking in order to do this? And then we assume that's what they do. So, when we were talking about solution and blame, right? You remember that I was talking about one of the differences that solution-oriented people tend to think of the person who has a problem as the agent. So think of what can this person do to solve the problem. And blame-oriented people tend to think of them as the victim, right? Who is it that hurt this person? So that if you have a solution-oriented black conservative who talks about how the problems in the black community need to be fixed by people in the black community changing their choices. The blame people will hear him saying it's black people's own fault, and they will think he is saying something bad about black people, and they will think he's a racist. Whereas he's not thinking about blame at all. He's trying to solve the problem. Meanwhile, when the blame people say, look, this isn't black people's fault, it's white racism. The black conservative, and this is not theoretical because I've read this, this enrages black conservatives who consider that the other people are saying that black people are so incompetent and powerless that they can't solve their problems without help. And they think the other people are being racist. Each side thinks that the other person is insulting black people and is a racist. Because the blame people naturally assume that the black conservative guy is talking about who's to blame. And the black conservative naturally assumes the other people are in solution mode. And from solution mode, one thing is an insult, and from blame mode, the other thing is an insult. So each side genuinely thinks the other side is a racist who has a low opinion of black people. Because each side hears the other person from their own perspective. And this happens constantly. So the truth is, and this is a very useful thing for you young people to learn as soon as you can. When you hear one person talking bad about another person, accusing another person of being a jerk in some specific way, that accusation usually doesn't tell you anything about the person who's being accused. What it tells you is about the person who's doing the accusation. So a person who's constantly accusing other people of lying, you probably ought not trust them, because they're assuming that other people are like them. Okay? A person who's if there's somebody that you know and there's something that they're always accusing other people of doing, well, it's probably not that everybody else in the world does that. Probably they do it all the time. Okay? Accusations tend to tell you more about the person making the accusation. And the stories that we tell, when we get angry, if you go and look, a whole bunch of the time, what's happening is we are telling ourselves a story in which the other person is deliberately doing something bad. That the other person's motives are bad. That the other person's disrespecting us. Or the other person is doing, and we're telling a story, and that story is based on what we think is what's going on in the other person's head, and then we get angry. Okay? So, if we look at the opposites of anger as an emotional state, there are several, right? There's not just one opposite. And one is apathy. The opposite of being all furious is, so, what do I care? Right? Just not being upset at all is one opposite. Another one is grace, and we'll talk more about what that means. Respect. Anger in human beings is tied surprisingly closely to respect and gentleness. Because one of the basic characteristics, one of the sort of defining characteristics of anger as an emotional state is that you want the other person to feel pain. Anger is the state of wanting the other person to hurt. So the things you say and do when you're angry are designed to hurt the other person. Okay? So what we want to do, again, you don't want to say, don't be angry. You want to replace it with the positive. You want to say, instead of being angry, let's do this. One or more of these four. So we're going to talk briefly about each of these four. And we'll start with apathy, which apathy sounds like a bad word to us. In point of fact, there is such a thing as godly apathy. And it comes to the question of what do you care what other people think? And think about Paul when he says, am I seeking the favor of men or of God? If I were still pleasing men, I wouldn't be a servant of Christ. A whole bunch of the time when we get angry, we are getting angry at people where someone who's not involved could quite reasonably say, why do you care? Why do you care what some random idiot that you've never heard of says about you on Facebook? Why do you care? Why do you care about that person's opinion? A whole bunch of the time, you can solve the problem just by not caring what they think, which tends to be much easier for guys than it is for women, but still, if you can get it, you can solve it. So we shouldn't be apathetic towards people. But there's a whole bunch of people whose opinions ought not really matter to us. And that any emotional energy we spend on those people's opinions is emotional energy that's wasted. So, having said that, You have to be careful with apathy because it's not just an opposite of anger, it's also an opposite of love. Okay, so from last week, for the parents who were here last week, where we were talking about there are two separate messages, two separate relational messages that are important, and one of them is you matter to me, and another one, which is quite different, is your opinions matter to me, right? There are people whose opinions ought not matter to you, but people ought to matter, right? So I want to make that distinction clear. So here are people whose opinions we should care about. This is my personal opinion, and we can stop and argue about this if you want, but these are the only categories of people that I care what their opinions are. And this is as a result of having thought about who I should care about. So, people who are smart and who know me and who are on my side. If Helen tells me that there is an issue with my behavior, then that is something that matters to me. Right? These are people whose opinions are intrinsically valuable. There are few people more useful than someone who knows you well and who cares about you and who disagrees with you about practically everything. You will learn more from those people than from any other 5 people in your life. So you find somebody like that, you want to hang on to them, right? People who know you and care about you and agree about you with everything, they make you feel smart, but you don't really learn much, right? People who don't like you, you can learn something useful from them, but you have to wade through so much nonsense because so much of what they think about you isn't accurate because they don't like you and they tell themselves bad, false stories about you. But someone who cares about you and knows you and is smart and is wise, their opinions are valuable. And if they disagree with you a lot about stuff, then they have valuable opinions about where there's a good chance you're wrong. So those are really useful people to have. You want to find things like that and keep them. Secondly is, even if someone's kind of an idiot, if you have to deal with them all the time, then you got to care what they think because you need to get along with them. Right? So even if you have not done anything wrong and they're completely misinterpreting your reactions, if they're on your project team, then you need to get that straightened out. Right? Whereas if it's some random person on Facebook, you can say, think what you want, I'm dealing with my kids, and on you go. Right? People who have the power to hurt us, or people who have the power to hurt people whom we love. What those people think matters. Right? So, the best example I can think of for this is I stopped, like most parents, I stopped spanking my children in public a long time ago, even though I think spanking children, small children, can be an extremely useful act of discipline. But I don't spank children in public because some idiots liable to call CPS. And even though I don't have any interest whatsoever in that person's opinion, CPS can make my life miserable. Children's Protective Services.
Don't get ideas.
Yeah. Yes. You're not allowed to call them the next time you spank them. And there's one other group of people, and this is something where you can't invest too much because sometimes you can't change their opinion. But there are people who will base their opinions about Jesus based on their opinions about us. You kids need to understand that how you behave in public affects how people think about your parents. Right? For the sake of the people you care about, you should be willing to put at least a little bit of trouble into controlling what those people think about you. So it's one thing to say, I don't care about the opinions of this guy because I don't care what he thinks about me. But if your parents care, then you need to care. Right? If it's somebody who's If it's somebody who's teetering on, the edge of whether or not to become a Christian, then you ought to care if they misunderstand something that you do, which makes them think badly of Christ. And as far as I can tell, that's the only people whose opinions we ought to care about. That's the only people whose opinions we ought to invest time and energy in worrying about. Now, this is purely my personal opinion, which is why there aren't any Bible verses there, and so you are welcome to disagree. But I have found that life is so much simpler, and I have so fewer problems. So I get angry so much less often by this principle. And I will give you a real life example. So, I'll try to tell you as much as you need to know to get the point. So my ex-wife and her mother waged a campaign of slander against me. As part of the maneuvering of the divorce, they accused me of sexually abusing my daughters. They accused my parents of sexually abusing me. My ex-wife's mother accused my mother of having an incestuous affair with my uncle. And I did not continue going to the church that my ex-wife and I had attended together. And I have no doubt that there were lots of things said to the people of the church as soon as I was not there to defend myself. This saved me an immense amount of agony and frustration, because I was able to say very early on, just logically, that there were only going to be two kinds of people at that church that my ex-wife slandered me to. There would be the people who had enough sense to understand that you probably ought not, and I hope you guys have enough sense not to just take what I say about my ex-wife as gospel. But there were going to be the people at the church who knew that, when you only hear one side, they always sound right, and all of that, and who would, at the very least, withhold judgment. And I didn't have to worry about those people because they weren't believing anything bad about me. And the people who did believe were idiots. So why should I care what they thought? And I had plenty of other anger to deal with everything that was going on, but I invested no particular effort at all in keeping from being angry at the people at my old church who might have believed bad things about me, because the only ones who would were idiots, and why should their opinion matter? They did not fall into this category because they weren't wise. They didn't fall into this category because I wasn't going to that church anymore. And there were other people I was worried about. I wasn't worried about them doing me harm, right? And I just didn't have to deal with anger towards those people. Actually, a lot of people spend a lot of time being mad at people who don't fit this, like random people on Facebook. Right? So, you just let it go. So, how do you manage not to care? So, the suboptimal approach is the one that I just described, which is those people are idiots, so why do I care what they think? So, it worked for me. There are better approaches. If that was my real life thing, a more godly person than me would have a better example. But better approach again. Remember how the subconscious works, right? It's not to say, in other words, don't spend your time trying to say, I don't care what this person thinks, right? Because what are you telling your subconscious? I care about what this person thinks, right? So, what would be the alternative? Try to think of the positive.
Yeah, something else.
Yeah. So what, for example?
Instead of caring about this person, I care about so and so, the other.
Yes.
Elliot, you're going to have to go away because you're like a person who knows the answer. Actually, that's awesome.
Yeah.
He is exactly right. I care so much about Helen's opinion. Right? I care so much about God's opinion, I don't have time left over to worry about the random Facebook guy's opinion. So he's absolutely right. Absolutely right. You get the list of the people that you care about, and whenever you find yourself worried about whether someone else thinks you're being a jerk, then you just say, well, what's God's opinion on it? Because if God thinks I'm being a jerk, I need to go do something about it. All right? Okay? And I will just throw this in, by the way. It matters to kids enormously that their parents have a good opinion of them. So one of the skills to be developed as parents is to be able to make it clear to children that while we have a low opinion of the behavior in which they just engaged, we have a good opinion of them. So that's just a little freebie thrown in. It seems to be much easier for guys to not care what people think. It seems to be much easier for men than it is for women to just say, I don't care what they think. And obviously there are women, obviously this is just a generalization, but it's a reasonably valid generalization. So this is a place where, so I haven't done this with Helen, but I did major damage to my relationship with my sister when I was young, because I thought my sister was stupid because she cared so much what other people thought, and I thought she was an idiot. It's like, what's wrong with you? You care about these people, right? That was not helpful. So if you're someone to whom this comes easily, you need to remember that there are a lot of people for whom this does not come easily at all. And if you are a guy who is an acts of service guy and has no problem at all with this, and you are married to a woman whose words of affirmation, this is going to be really, really hard. It's really hard for a words of affirmation person to not care when other people say bad things about you.
Sometimes imagine there is someone say bad word. That's even worse. As you said, right? So on Facebook, someone said, but they say they worry about someone might say something of it. They haven't said it yet. It's even worse. You are dealing with a virtual enemy that doesn't really.
That's exactly right. That's exactly and so one of the reasons this is so effective for me is that it's temperamentally easy for me. So for those of us that it's temperamentally easy to just say, I don't care what they think. You've got to understand that it's not easy for a lot of other people, and that so. Helen, is trying to learn to swim, and she has panic issues, right? So, if you don't have panic issues, and you can stick your face in the water, and logically, I can see the water, and it's 2 feet deep, so I'm not scared, right? Then it is tempting when you have someone that they put their face in the water, and then they pop back up to say, it's 2 feet deep, you can stand up. Just go do it. What are you scared about, right? But that is not helpful, right? It's not a logical thing. There are people who are wired to really, really care what other people think. And it is not helpful to just say, stop worrying about what they think. It's not that easy. So, this is your best chance. If you're one of those people, you're going to care about what people think. So just shift the person that you're caring about. That's your best chance. Okay. Now, Grace, what time are we supposed to stop? 4:30?
Yeah, but we started like 15 minutes later, so.
I'm just trying to figure out how much time I've got. So, this is like 2 weeks in a row that I have.
You told that.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. This is 2 weeks in a row where I have realized that I had a story that I was going to tell for effect, and then it got WeChatted the week before, and I ruined the whole story. So this story is straight out of this 3 days in Shanghai. Right? It's my opening story that Helen put on WeChat. So pretend you haven't heard it. when I first went to Shanghai to meet Helen, I went there for Memorial Day, which is another story. So I went there for a 4-day weekend when I trip to China. So she lived in Songjiang, which is what, 2 hours? 2 hours to get to the airport. I think you had to get up at 4:30. So yeah, it's like other side of Shanghai. So I told her that I had to leave on Monday morning, and I said my flight's at 9 o'clock, but it's an international flight, and I'm only room for stuff to go wrong, so I want to be there by 7. So get me there at 7, because she had to get up, she had to go to the hotel, she had to check me out of the hotel, because nobody at the hotel spoke English, and I started to speak Mandarin, and then we had the cab. She had to get up at like 4:30. So she gets up at 4:30, she gets me to the airport, there's nobody there. And I'm like, why are they not open yet? We're leaving in 2 hours. And we go to get some coffee, and then I pull out the reason I was thinking 9 o'clock is that the flight was at 11, and I wanted to get there 2 hours early. So I realized that, and now if you had been gotten out of bed at 4:30 and then discovered that you could have slept till 6:30, most of us would be somewhat annoyed with the idiot who had done that to us, right? Helen's like, I knew I should have looked at it myself. And she sort of looks at me, and then she sort of laughs and says, "You're so cute." And I thought, holy cow, she might actually be in love with me. Because, if you're not, then coffee goes on the head, right? That is grace. Now, kids can, go to the bathroom and get a drink, because you have heard this at some length already, so I'm going to talk to your parents about New Testament grace. So I have a question. In all of human history, what person got the most grace from God the Father? Jesus. Helen, did you just
can't
answer?
say it. Huh?
Did you just answer?
No. Sally did.
All right, so next time I do this, I will have to say, those of you who have heard this, don't say the answer.
I didn't even know.
The answer is Jesus, which usually nobody comes up with. And the reason is that we are trained in English with a concept of grace that does not actually match the New Testament concept of, not exactly grace, but charis is the way you say that word. And one of the reasons you can tell that it doesn't match is that this Greek word only gets translated as grace when it matches the theologian's definition of grace. The Greek concept, what the word that Paul is using and that his audience was hearing, is not the English word grace, it's the Greek word charis, and it doesn't mean the same thing, because you can tell, because it doesn't always get translated the same way. So, the standard definition that you'll get at the seminary is God's unmerited favor. Okay? And for us, grace is a church word now. It's not a word that we use in ordinary speech. The Greek word is a word that wasn't a church word at all. Paul was trying to find a word that came close to explaining how God felt about us. So he took a word that was an ordinary word that was used in ordinary human relationships all the time and said, this is how God feels about us, except something important. The connotation of unmerited for us is an essential part of the word, and I can show you that very easily by just saying this. If you ask me, what kind of, Caleb's not here, so we'll pick on Caleb. If you ask me, what do you think of Caleb? And I say, well, I give him a lot of grace. Right? You know right now that Caleb is a pain in the butt. Right? Because otherwise I wouldn't need to give him grace. Grace is what we give sinners. Right? Grace is how we feel about sinners. But to Paul and his original readers, the connotation was exactly the opposite. Grace was how you felt about the coolest, most awesome people in your life. And the standard expectation was you felt grace to the people who deserved it. When Paul used that word and then said, we're saved through grace and God shows His love in that while we were still sinners, He died for us. It was a shock that God would feel like this about people who were the opposite of deserving it. Okay? Grace in the New... Now, I'm not saying that this is what the English word grace means, and I'm not telling you to stop using the theological definition, because the systematic theologians worked this out because it is useful in theology. So I'm not telling you this is wrong. I'm just telling you it's different. Okay? So grace in the New Testament sense is it's primarily an emotion, and it is the delight that we take in the most admirable. Grace is how I feel about Helen. Grace is not how I feel about the annoying person at work that I am very carefully patient with. Grace is not how I feel about the people I have to give a lot of grace to. It's how I feel about Helen. Okay?
Thank you.
I just picked this as one example of a verse where we don't translate that word as grace because we only use grace for sinners and Jesus didn't sin. This word, what Paul, every English translation I know of says Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. And I noticed that in Chinese too. It doesn't use andian, it uses, I can't remember the word it uses. Something I. Instead of andian, it uses something I.
Luke.
I thought I was done at it and I forgot to. But the word is charis. It means basically Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature, and the older he got, the more awesome everybody thought he was.
所以说神和人喜爱他的心都一起增长。喜爱他。
喜爱。Instead of unban. If we make undeserved part of our definition of grace, what happens is we lose some useful information about how to treat other people, and in particular with anger, because... Oh, here it is. There we go. So apparently I started doing this slide and then thought I had finished and then forgotten.
Oh,
there it is. So, the way we tend to think about grace is that if someone is a jerk, then grace causes us to forgive him and to stop being mad at him. If we actually feel grace towards the person in the original sense, what grace actually does is it keeps you from telling yourself a story in which he is a jerk in the first place. Think about it. If you know this in yourself and other people, if there's somebody who you really like and somebody else who you don't like, right? And they do the same thing without even thinking about it, you will assume that the person you like is not being a jerk. And the story you tell yourself will be a story about how they misunderstood. Or, right? And the person you've already decided you don't like, he did that on purpose. Okay? Grace controls the stories we tell. We tell ourselves good stories about the people we like, and we tell ourselves bad stories about the people we've already decided we dislike. So, telling yourself the best possible story about somebody comes naturally when you feel grace towards them. So what we have to do is we have to learn how to tell ourselves the good stories even about the people that we don't naturally feel grace to. Because we need to be treating everybody the way we treat the people that... Grace is what makes it easy for us to treat people the way we're supposed to. Right? So if you look at how you deal with the people that you're just really crazy about, you tend not to get as angry with those people when they do the same sorts of things. Now, the exception to that is people that you live with all the time. There's bound to be 2 or 3 things that you find really annoying, and then, and then that really annoys you. But generally speaking, the people you like, you don't get mad at nearly as much. It's not that you forgive them more easily, it's you don't get mad at them in the first place. So, what you want to do, almost always, if you look at something someone's done, if you decide you're going to do it, you can sit down and you can make up 5 or 6 different stories about what could have been going on in their heads to cause them to do that. If you will just stop and try, you'll discover it's actually not hard. You can think of several different stories. There are almost always multiple stories. About the only time is if someone says, well, I did this because, right? Well, if they tell you what's going on inside their head, then you know what's going on inside their head. Otherwise, you don't. You feel like you do, but you don't. And even, especially if he's a guy and he's clueless about what's going on inside himself, even if he tells you, this is what I was thinking, sometimes that's not even the case, right? But the polite thing to do when someone tells you, I did this because I hate you, is to believe that he hates you. But most of the time, we've made it up ourselves. We've picked the story, not them. It helps me to remember that the story I picked says more about me than it does about him. And again, you can tell that just because you tell different stories about the people you like than you do about the people you dislike. Then they behave exactly the same way. Yes?
Then are you going to talk about, I don't know if you can talk about why we like our kids, but we don't
Get so
anger
mad
to
at
somebody else
But you get
kids,
so
but
mad at-
we're easier
So-
to mad at our own.
I wasn't planning to, but it's all right.
Comment issue.
Yeah, I was thinking
We'll
about
leave
the
it
same thing.
I think myself, so this is purely my theory, and then you guys can think about whether this is true or not. I think there is a whole bunch of fear and pride involved in how we think and feel about our kids because how they grow up is such a reflection on us. And so I think one of the reasons that you see some other kid behaving badly, and America's Funniest Home Videos, one of the things that drove me crazy about that show is if any episode that had a little kid on that show who was being really obnoxious, behaving really badly, they were guaranteed to win the $10,000 because most people thought it was funny, as long as it wasn't their kid.
Yeah.
But if it's your kid, it makes you look bad. And it is natural for us to want to leave a legacy, and our best legacy is our kids. And if our kids are behaving badly, they're threatening our legacy. And I think now I may just be describing myself, right? But I think there's a lot of that.
So it's a different driven, right?
Yeah.
But I think also we really worry about them, maybe worry too much, not like how they will grow up and reflect us, but we just want them to be godly.
Yeah, so that's what I said,
Yeah.
there's pride and fear. I think there's a
Fear.
lot of pride and a
That's
lot of
fear.
fear in how we deal with our kids. Because they're so closely related to us, that their behavior matters much more.
So it's fear.
So
And,
that's worth what you paid for.
and also you don't want to see them wasting their time, right? That's not fear, that's,
Well,
just don't like it.
that's more, I want my kid to come out being someone I can be proud of.
No.
it is for me. It doesn't necessarily follow it is for you. So there again, this is just,
Maybe subconsciously.
But time is the gift from God, right? And you shouldn't waste it.
the other thing that's helpful, just remember how it feels to you when someone else misjudges your motives. That has happened to all of us. I find this useful too. When I'm sitting about thinking about how someone else is a jerk, it helps me to remind myself how I feel when somebody slanders my motives. So that it helps me really not want to do that to them. Okay? Now you do have to worry about the possibility that he's really being a jerk. But even in that case, all you're really doing is you're saying, okay, if he is being a jerk, this is what I need to do to protect myself. But I can take those measures just to be safe, but I can hope that that's not what's going on. Right? I can say I'm going to hope that his motives are good. Although, since there's a pretty good chance that it isn't, I am going to make sure I record the next phone conversation or whatever it is. But, all right. Next thing is respect. I think we generally tend to grossly underestimate how closely respect is tied to anger. It is remarkably difficult to feel angry with someone who is communicating respect to you. If somebody is angry and you respond by showing them respect, it has an extraordinarily calming effect. It's very useful for children to know.
Yes.
Okay? If your parents are angry, you can make it worse or you can make it better.
Yes.
Respect makes it better. Okay? But that works even when you're a grown-up and not with parents. It's really easy to get angry at someone who has done you no harm at all, except made you feel disrespected. If I'm driving 65 miles an hour and the guy cuts in front of me and I don't even have to press my brakes, I'm still going 65 miles an hour, I can get mad. Right? He's done absolutely no harm to me at all.
Danger.
But disrespect, it's much more disrespect for most people. The thing that's really surprising though is that if you are angry with somebody and you make yourself express respect, it's actually remarkable how much that reduces your own anger. And I don't even know exactly how this works. I just know that it does. If you use your body language and everything else and you say, you realize you're angry with someone and you go out of your way to make a gesture of respect, it's remarkable how much it calms you down. I don't know why it works. But it does. And I think really it's just that respect is so opposed to anger.
If you get stopped by the police,
Mm-hmm.
if you show great respect to police officers, you will get away with it.
It makes it
What did
look
I
better.
do wrong?
But you'll notice, did you notice there's practically no one in the world more polite than a police officer who is coming up to ask you for your license and registration, right? And believe me, they are trained, right? May I see your license and registration, right? Because the people who train police know this, that if the police officer comes in and he is being extremely polite and is expressing respect, that's the single biggest thing they can do to calm the situation down. If they come up and they say, do you have any idea how fast you were driving? They are begging to get shot. They are escalating.
Is that
Right.
because China, they're more intense?
Yeah, in China
Between
it's
the
not like-
police,
yeah.
right? The police show the authority. Say whatever I
Arrogant.
want to say. Then the other guy is like died. So it's like
Yes.
Because Chinese, they
But
don't
in
have
China,
guns.
relatively few people in China have a gun.
Yeah, yeah. You cannot shoot them.
Um,
oh.
this is the other important point. If when someone's not around, you feel free to make fun of them, and to treat them disrespectfully, another important thing for kids to understand. You may say to yourself, it's not doing any harm, they don't know. But you are changing your attitude towards them,
Yes.
and you will find that it becomes easier for you to get angry with them. When you indulge in disrespect, you are essentially training you are prepping your subconscious for anger towards that
So
person.
that's why wife cannot talk bad things about their husband. You know.
Even in their bad.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Yes,
why you don't.
that's true.
It's why you don't talk badly about people behind their back. Basically, it changes you.
Yeah.
It changes
I
you and
just
your feelings
realized
towards them.
that.
When you are telling your subconscious, this is somebody to whom I feel free to feel contempt. Your subconscious hears, this is someone for whom I should feel free to feel anger.
It's in general bad, especially when someone else will come back tell you, do you know that he talked to you about this? Now
Oh,
it's
yeah.
completely ruined the two.
A very, very, very bad thing. So, I find this useful whenever I'm tempted to express disrespect. Imagine that they're standing in front of you and listening. That helps. That helps me a lot. And think about, too, how much more difficult it is to express disrespect for someone who's standing in front of you and looking at you, right? That's what's terrible about social media. It's also what's terrible about road rage. You're isolated away from the person. You're furious at the guy who cut in front of you. You can't see his eyes. He's in front of you, right? It's much easier to be disrespectful when there's distance. So I just imagine them not being distant. That helps me. Don't know if it'll help you. And then there's gentleness. And I put this in and forgot to, I must have copied it. So never mind. I'll talk about gentleness without a slide. This went really late last night.
He stayed up till 5
Because I've never done this before. Helen has wanted me to do this for a long time. All the other stuff, I've done it before, so I could take old stuff and sort of adapt it. And this took a long time for me to actually get happy with it. So, when you're disrespected, when you feel like someone has disrespected you, which tends to make us angry, tell an alternate story to yourself. So let me give you an example. The guy who cuts in front of me, is weaving around traffic. My natural response, my instinctive story is, who does that guy think he is? That he's so much more important than all the rest of us. And then I get angry. If I were instead to say, I wonder what's wrong.
Yes.
I wonder what emergency that guy's having. I hope his wife's not in labor.
Yes.
I hope he isn't, right?
Yes. Yes.
Running to hospital.
Yeah.
Well, for all I know, he is. How do I know that he's being? How do I know that he's an arrogant jerk? Well, the fact that he's driving a Lamborghini would be a clue as much as an issue, but still. I mean, how do I know? Why not tell myself the good story?
So,
Right? Why not? I find myself getting mad. Say, well, what story am I telling? Why don't I tell a different story?
so when kids disrespect us, what different story we can tell them?
That's still kids.
Kids are a different thing because you have a responsibility for their behavior. The guy in the car, I don't have to make him be nice. So if he's being a jerk and I tell myself that he isn't being a jerk, well, then there's no harm done because it's not like I'm going to chase him down and spank him.
So we should
Start
tell
being a jerk.
kids, hey, you're being a jerk now.
I don't think kids are disrespecting the parents. Kids probably are misaligned to the instruction you give it to them. because they didn't do exactly what we said, and then we categorize it, you disrespect.
You dis-
They didn't actually, I think honestly, they're not disrespecting. If they disrespecting you, they will simply ignore you at all.
Ah,
They
yeah.
will say, you want the, I can tell from kids, you say, you do this, okay. That's worse than, no, why should I do it, right? Because you already pushed them to a point, they don't care what you say. You say, oh, okay, okay.
They don't do
Well, as
that.
teenagers, you do that.
So what I do with Kai, for example.
Told
I'll make
Sally
it,
said,
I'll make it explicit, right? Say,
we still love.
what your body language is saying right now is this. Is this what you're trying to say? Right? Is this, do we really have an issue? That if it's by a stranger, then you can go back to, what do I care? You can go back to apathy. What do I care? And see if you can laugh about it. And I have a story, so I'm not going to finish the PowerPoint, and this is going to be fine. So I have this is a true story. So I grew up in Texas, and I'll apologize if I offend anybody here with a sexist attitude. I'm a guy. So I grew up in Texas, and Texas has a lot of really, really attractive women.
What?
There you go. Then I got projects in London. And English women are not, people don't go to England to see the beautiful women. Right? Sweden, Texas, no. So I was sitting in a restaurant, and an actually pretty girl was walking by the sidewalk, and I looked up and saw her, and I thought, well, there's a pretty girl. And then she looked up and made eye contact with me. The thing is, if you're a pretty girl in London,
Before Hannah, right?
you own the world. Right?
before
And
me,
this is long before I met you.
Oh.
And
you are safe now.
she gave me a look that said, as plainly as if she had held up a sign, she gave me a look that said, yeah, right, good luck. Right. And what you have any chance with me? And I thought it was hilarious. So I broke out, and I don't know whether she expected me to break out laughing, but that was a way better response, right? To think, that's pretty funny. Right? She obviously didn't look at me and think, there's a handsome guy. Right? If you can laugh about it, then you're good. Right? If someone's disrespectful to you, and I find that actually to be pretty useful with rude drivers and everything else, right? To make a rude gesture, actually, if you can laugh about it, then you're good. So, we'll go a little ways into this. So that's anger is an emotional state, and it's mostly a matter of changing the story. It's mostly a matter of changing the story that you're telling yourself. Which I think, so again, I'm not a trained psychotherapist, but what I think that means is that I am a proponent of cognitive therapy. Insofar as I understand what cognitive therapy is, it's about changing the stories you tell yourself. And at least with anger, that for me has been the key. Now, when it comes to anger as a sin, this is when it's not a matter of how we feel physically or how we feel emotionally. This is where you get into the choices that we make. And so to a certain extent, obviously, if you're deliberately choosing to tell yourself a different story, that's good. But I have never understood how anybody who is holding a grudge against anyone can pray the Lord's Prayer and not feel terror. We do not say, forgive us our trespasses. We say, forgive us our trespasses as we have forgiven those who trespass against us. We do not ask God to forgive our sins. We ask God to treat us the way we treat the people who have done us wrong. I never understood how anybody who was holding a grudge could pray the Lord's Prayer and not get worried. And it's not like that's the only thing. Jesus explicitly said, I forgot to look up where, but Jesus specifically said, if you do not forgive other people their sins, your heavenly Father will not forgive your sins. And there is the terrifying parable of the guy who owed the rich man, billions of dollars in modern terms. And the rich guy forgave his debt. And he was saying, just give me time and I'll pay it back. And it's absurd. And the rich guy says, you know what, I'm writing it off. And he walks out, sees somebody who owes him $20, says, where's my money? The guy says, oh, give me time, I'll pay it back. And he has him thrown in jail. And the rich guy finds out about it and says, off you go. Jesus actually was really clear that despite all the grace and love and everything else that God has for us, that we cannot expect our sins to be forgiven if we refuse to forgive other people. And when we hang on to it, when we hang on to the anger, when we choose the anger, then we are in disobedience. And so I think, now, Bill Gothard was a guy who was very popular when I was in high school, and I would not cite Bill Gothard as an authority for anything, because I went to his stuff, and his handling of Scripture was pretty seriously irresponsible. And I think actually fairly recently he was removed from his position at the ministry that he founded for inappropriate behavior of some sort. But this thing that he said I have found useful, which is that when we get angry, at the bottom of the anger, he said always, I would say frequently, we are making a claim. There's something that we feel we have a right to and that we didn't get. And that we are angry about it. And I don't think that's always true, but it's true a pretty high percentage of the time, at least for me. So I found it very useful to say, what is it that I am actually mad about? Not in the sense of, well, I'm mad because Helen has made me late again, right? That's not what I mean. It is, what right do I have for Helen to not make me late? Right? I'm angry because Helen owes it to me to help me get places on time. Well, does she?
I helped you
Right?
today.
She helped me today, right? And so the first question is, does she? Really? And one of the things that you'll discover is that it's remarkable how when you do that, it's remarkable what percentage of the time, once you are honest with yourself about what it is, then you're saying, I have a right to make other people change their plans, but to never have them change mine. And the fact is, it's remarkable, at least in my experience, how often when I look at what I'm really mad about, I'm like, actually, that's kind of stupid. I don't have any business being angry about that. So this has been a useful diagnostic question for me. But what you'll find is that the stories that tend to contribute to anger, most of them come from envy, or suspension, or self-justification, or self-righteousness. In my experience. Your knowledge may differ because you're not necessarily like me, right? So, Gothard's suggestion, which I have found useful, is to deliberately yield your rights. So sometimes you look at it and you realize, I don't actually have that right. I'm being a jerk. They're not being a jerk. I'm being a jerk. I should stop being a jerk. And once we have faced up to what it is that we're really demanding, and we realize, well, I'm kind of being a narcissist. I don't actually have any right to that. That usually solves my anger. It turns it into embarrassment because I'm being a jerk. But it is useful to be able to set our rights aside in advance. And I told your kids a while back that all the joyful people I know, I don't know any joyful people whom you would characterize as full of resentment and bitterness. Every joyful person I know is characterized by gratitude. The key to joy is gratitude. And the key to gratitude is low expectations. And I have a friend, I said that on Facebook once, and my friend said this better than I ever will. An expectation is a premeditated resentment. That is awesome.
Wives need to learn that.
That is absolutely awesome. Yes.
But if we keep our expectations to kids too low, do they
Well,
cannot
So
To a low
you keep your goals high and your expectations reasonable.
Low.
Right?
Keep the expectation to ourselves, don't tell them.
Kids do not.
Well, no, you have to keep the goals high.
just like God, right?
Easy to please, hard to satisfy. Okay. So here's how low expectations work, and this is why having low expectations makes it seems so counterintuitive, but it is so much easier to have a high opinion of somebody if you start with a low opinion of them. So let's say that I've got a friend who has 10 chances to do something nice for me, and they do 5 of them.
Is the glass half empty or half full?
Yeah, is the glass half empty? And you know what you say if you're an engineer? You say that glass is twice as big as it needs to be. But if I am a person who expects my friend to do the 10 nice things, what I see are the 5 times they let me down. If I start with no expectation that my friend will go out of their way to do nice for me, what I see are the 5 things they did nice for me that they did not have to do. And in the first place, I'll be full of resentment, and I'll be telling myself what a jerk they are. And I'll be mad at them for all those times they didn't help me out the way they should have. But if I'm a low expectation person, I'll be grateful. Look at the nice things this guy did for me that he did not have to do. And my friend is doing exactly the same thing. It's not a difference in him at all. It is 100% the difference in me. Right? So, every expectation is a claim to a right. And there is no place this is more deadly than in marriage. Right? We go into marriage with all these expectations, many of which we don't even know we have, because it's just the way it's always done in our family, right?
But sometimes, like when a wife has really 0 expectation from husband, that means she's like so disappointed, so desperate, like give up.
So, you can have low expectations because you are not making lots of claims. You can also have low expectations because you have reached the point of holding the other person in contempt.
Yeah, not too kind.
The second one is deadly.
Yeah.
But usually you will find that the person who has reached the level of contempt started with high demands.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And then
And
lower and lower.
if you have a husband who bats 500 and you have chosen the path of resentment, you can have 2 wives. One of them winds up holding the husband in contempt and saying, "I can't ever count on him." Right? So this is something that we have in our control. We don't have control of what the other people do, but we can choose the path of gratitude rather than the path of resentment. Right?
That is hard.
And then if I'm angry, what right is it that I'm claiming? And I've already mentioned that. So, envy. So this is one of the 7 deadly sins. You guys know the 7 deadly sins? all Catholics know the Seventh-day Adventists, right? There's a great moment on Hollywood Squares. You guys probably didn't grow up watching Hollywood Squares, but this was a game show where it was like tic-tac-toe, except in each box there was some celebrity sitting there, and the contestants would pick a celebrity. There'd be a question, the celebrity would have to answer it, and then you said you agreed or disagreed, and if you were right, you got the X or the O. Right? So, one of the guys who was on there a lot was a guy named Paul Lynde, and the game show host, at one point, the contestant had picked Paul Lynde, and the host said, "Pride, lust, envy, gluttony, greed, wrath, sloth, collectively these are known as what?" And then said, "The Bill of Rights." It is purely destructive. An envious person if you're not envious, this is so hard to understand, but an envious person would prefer more misery in his life if that lowered the other people to his level than to have himself be better off, but have other people be way better off than him. There are whole schools of politics that are based on people saying that equality is more important than prosperity. That we'd rather have everybody be equally miserable than have everybody be happy, that some people be way happier than other people.
That's it.
It is weird, but you'd be amazed at how many people are like that. And that is what envy, fundamentally, envy says another person's happiness is a reason for me to be unhappy. Envy resents somebody else's happiness. And Jesus didn't have any use for it. Right? So the parable of the workers in the vineyard, they were saying it's not fair. And this is, so one of the things my father said the most often to me when I was a kid, and that I appreciate, is he said over and over, life isn't fair, get over it. Because it isn't. Never going to be. Right? And the thing of it is, fairness, in the sense that we use it when we say it's not fair, is not even important to God. Now, justice is important to God, but fairness is not, which is the whole point of this parable. God is not interested in fairness, He is interested in love. Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated. Right? What you'll find actually is that if you try to pin somebody down on what they mean by, what do you mean fair? I don't think I've ever had someone who's complaining that life ought to be fair, that I haven't, when I've asked them to explain an example of unfairness, that I haven't been able to give them an example of something that was logically equivalent that they didn't object to. And the reason is, when an American at least says it's not fair, what they mean is somebody I dislike has something, and somebody I do like doesn't have it. The people who complain the most about income inequality in the United States are not bothered in the slightest by the income inequality between someone living in America and someone living in Kenya. Right? We are outraged by unfairness on the basis of loyalty. So there's the group that we care about. All these other Americans have way more money than I have, and that's not fair. But the fact that I have way more money than the people in Kenya doesn't bother me. Right? And you will find that the people who complain a great deal about fairness, only certain types of unfairness bother them, and it's based on loyalty. Envy is at the basis of this because it wants to convince us that the person who has the good fortune deserves to be hated. That they deserve for us to be mad at them, that they're a bad person, right? So, if we ask what the right is that we're claiming, it's, I have the right to other people not being happier than me, right? I have the right to other people not having more than me. The Bible does not say that. You do not actually have that right. And in fact, the godly reaction is to rejoice that the other person is happy. Right? And again, think about how we feel about the people we feel grace to. When they win the lottery, we are happy for them. Right? But when the guy who's treated you really badly at work and is a real jerk, when he wins the lottery, we are not typically happy for him. Right? Suspicion, I think we'll stop after this. So suspicion is a form of fear, and so you know how paranoid people, no matter what happens, they can tell themselves the story of how it's part of the plot. Right? Suspicion is not full-blown paranoia, but it acts like baby paranoia. Once you get suspicious of somebody, then the problem is, if we perceive someone else as a potential threat, then our subconscious starts telling us stories where he's an actual threat. And I'm just going to go fast. Basically, what you have to do there is you have to recognize the people that you're suspicious of, and you have to be aware of that and say, I am going to be prone to tell myself bad stories about this person. So I need to concentrate on reminding myself that all I have are suspicions, right? I don't have facts. So, what other explanations could there be? So this is mostly, I've said it already, tell yourself the other story. When this is coming from suspicion, right? What happens is you're suspicious, they do something, then you interpret it as they're out to get me, and then you get mad at them. Right? So you need to know the people that you feel threatened by so that you can concentrate on telling yourself different stories. Junior high girls, I think this is a major problem for junior high girls, and one of the reasons is because junior high girls in general can be so vicious. That there is so much psychological warfare that goes on with girls in junior high school. It doesn't work that way for guys at all, so it's a completely different world for junior high girls. In face cultures, right? Men in face cultures are prone to suspecting people of disrespecting them. A face culture is a culture in which your reputation is very important. In which, it's important to not lose face. So you live in Texas, and you're from a Chinese family. Chinese cultures is a face culture. Mexico is a face culture. America is not And if you're trying to yield your rights, with suspicion, it's not so much a matter of yielding your rights. A whole bunch of the time with suspicion, the thing to recognize is you actually haven't had your rights violated at all. Right? It's imaginary. It's suspicion. You're exactly right. There's this imaginary offense. You think they might do it, and the next thing you know, you think they have done it, and no reason to think they have at all. Self-justification. Look, obviously, if someone treats you badly, it's tempting to get angry with them and hate them. But there is a much more devastating thing. This is going to sound really weird, For anyone who is not, how many of you know what cognitive dissonance is? Cognitive dissonance is one of the psychological theories that is that has done best in therapeutic testing, is most likely true. It is the idea that we have a whole bunch of trouble whenever we have two things that we believe at the same time that are in conflict, and we find a way to not have, and we find a way to resolve it. So, if we treat another person badly, we tend to start finding excuses to hate them. Because we have this belief, I'm a nice person, and I treated this person badly. If he didn't deserve it, then I'm the bad guy. So you see this with bullying a lot, right? If you see a kid who sort of followed the pack, and he participated in bullying one of the weak kids, you can see that kid start coming up with reasons why the little kid deserved it. Right? And you become angry at the other person because you did him wrong. And that sounds completely illogical, but it happens a ton. Once you start treating somebody badly, if you have treated somebody badly, the biggest reason you need to apologize and get them right away is because you have got to break the cycle, because you're going to start treating them worse and worse, because you're going to be talking yourself into believing that they deserve everything you've done to them. And the more bad things you do to them, the more important it becomes to you to tell yourself that they deserve it. Okay?
It's like a building a lie. You lie first to cover your initial lie when you're building up.
Exactly. This is a very good book. I love the title. Mistakes were made, but not by me. This is a book on self-justification. All the things we do to avoid having to say, I was wrong. So, and we will stop there. We'll stop there.
Can we go back to